Good day to you all, and welcome to this joint webinar of EUA and ELIA on the topic of generative AI. My name is Maria Hansen, and I'm Executive Director of ELIA. ELIA is the European Network of Higher Arts Education. Our members are art universities, art academies, and faculties of art that are part of larger university structures, offering education in all disciplines of the arts. We are rooted in Europe with a solid global membership as well. We're happy to be part of this joint event with the EUA. The discussion around ChatGPT represents a timely occasion to look at the broader and increasingly sensitive subject of generative AI in higher education. As institutions go through this very critical phase of learning and adopting the new technology, this is the time to exchange good practice with each other. As you might guess, generative AI is no stranger to the arts and arts education. Based on a small survey we did amongst the ELIA membership, we found that a large majority of art students already integrate generative AI in their work and have for some time. But do educational institutions have policy in place around this technology? The advent of ChatGPT has made this conversation more urgent. Also, at the art universities, where few institutions have a policy, but most are recognizing the need to create one.
Also here from Brussels, from EUA, European University Association, covering more than, I think now, 870 members in 49 countries. From the side of universities, the advent of generative AI, and specifically ChatGPT, has been a kind of a wake-up call to just how disruptive these new technologies can be. And there's, of course, a lot of potential for all university missions in AI in general, and maybe particularly with generative AI. But there's been a lot of debate as well. So today we're going to look at some examples of the experiences that have been made already. I think we have a little bit of almost a sort of a déjà vu from COVID. Say something happens very suddenly, we get this new technology very suddenly, but universities also react very quickly and set up guidelines and experiments with policies. And we're going to listen to that today. So I want to say that it's been a pleasure, and it is a pleasure to work on this with ELIA. I think art schools and, let's say, more classical universities have a lot to learn from each other, and I'm really, really looking forward to that. As slight household remarks, I can see many of you greeting each other in the chat, and that is wonderful. If you want to ask questions, please go to the Q&A section. And also look at what other people are asking. You can vote the questions up or down, and that's fairly helpful for us also to see what are the questions you're particularly interested in hearing the answer to, because I suppose we will have a lot of questions. That being said, I think we're all looking forward to seeing all these examples. And Maria, will you introduce our first speaker?
Yes, I will do. And we have 4 speakers today, all of whom with a very particular expertise in the area of generative AI. The first 2 come from higher arts education, and I'm now really happy to introduce our first speaker, Pawel Pokutycki, creative technologist and senior lecturer at the Design Academy Eindhoven and the Royal Academy of Art, The Hague. Pawel works all over the world and is also a member of the ELIA Representative Board. Generative AI has been part of his life as a teacher for quite some time, and he will tell us more about how art students position themselves around the topic. Pawel, over to you.
Thank you, Maria. And as you mentioned, we've been in this field for already a longer while. Our sector, the higher arts education, have been looking into the possibilities and controversies around generative AI since a couple of years now. It's our daily bread. Today, our students and tutors have been engaging in creative work with AI, machine learning quite enthusiastically full of curiosity, but also certain level of criticality towards that. Yeah, and as it's, for me, it's a deja vu with this topic, because I remember the emergence of digital photography and how there were concerns whether would it be the end of the authenticity of the image and the photography as such, even. Then moving on to the internet times, Creative Commons, copyleft, challenging sort of conventional approaches to copyright. Did it really change our sector? It did, but for good, for bad, it's a discussion, ongoing discussion. I'm taking a position here in which I'm highly enthusiastic about AI and the role of generative AI in the arts. If references are mentioned, if there is a critical reflections on these tools used, there's a certain level of transparency. I think we are ready to accept it and move on with these new developments. I'm going to share my presentation now. I ask the host for approval. Waiting for approval to share my slides. Thank you for waiting. So just a little bit before we go into beyond ChatGPT, this is a website, creativeai.org, which is just a repository of different tools and other references relevant for our students and tutors. Since I think 2019 or even earlier, of course, Runway ML, Midjourney, DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, OpenAI tools, experiments with Google, all of that has been leading us to perhaps seeing AI as a form of artistic intelligence. I leave the question mark behind it, because obviously it's a discussion point to what extent it is artistic, to what not, and how it is challenging us with our artistry. Our students, as already mentioned, have, I would say, in our sector, there are three positions towards generative art that I can distinguish, of course, from a my subjective perspective, working at different art schools. First is why not? The second is yes, but. And the third one is no, thank you. And I will have a couple of examples of the work done with the students of the past a couple of years that illustrate, I guess, these different approaches in a more or less random order. So, for instance, one of our students, Soyeon Park, graduated with students of the Royal Academy of Arts. Sorry to mention that. She graduated with a work, a film, an AI film on 3 screens, 3-channel installation. This is one of the stills from the film, generated, I think, with Stable Diffusion. And just to give you a bit of preview of the movie.
드디어 그를 만났다. 주위를 두리번거리다가 쓰러진 바위 틈을 가리키는 동지. 나는 그 아래로 급히 기어들어간다. 어두운 통로, 소리의 반영, 고요함. 휘어지고 꺾인 모퉁이와 지하도의 길목이 극도로 뒤얽히며 이어져서 언덕 아래로 수렴된다.
So we are dealing with a story, a narrative based on AI generated images in transition, and this work would receive international awards, be supported by, for instance, Dutch funds for culture. There is a climate for AI to be used, generative AI to be used in the practice of our students. Especially, again, as I mentioned before, if there is a critical reflection on the technology used and if the references are mentioned. In this case, that's the situation. Another example would be work of a former student and a teacher back then at Design Academy Eindhoven, who looked at all our graduation catalogs, copied all the texts, and with machine learning asked AI, trained a machine learning environment and asked to generate texts that would propose new types of graduation projects from the academy. So it's a critical reflection on what usually is being created, I guess, at the design academy. What could new types of projects be? And obviously, it's an ironic approach to all these works generated by humans, which is, I personally think, really fascinating, because maybe in case generative AI can challenge us this way, we can ask ourselves, well, can we do better than that? And how could we do better than that? Maybe coming up with ideas that AI could not think of. So this was an Instagram account that Jaap Knevel ran for a couple of years as a kind of, I would say, student prank online. But it was interesting if you spend a moment reading this text, quotes of non-existing students about the works. It's, I think, a very interesting approach to some early form of GPT back then. So our students would explore different techniques, different methods to find new forms of aesthetics and stories within AI generated or influenced works. It's often a collaboration with AI. In this case, what I also discovered is there is a growing tendency to work with AI, work with images generated with AI, but also transform them to, let's say, the analog space, to physical objects using more traditional crafts, and then exhibit it as a physical object rather than use screens. Or there is maybe these students fall into a section of yes, but or no, thank you, maybe something in between the two. We could see their process. And of course, what's interesting is that these things generated with AI and then with the manual crafts can come back again into the digital space. In this case, Jennifer Johns, an exchange student, I think from UAL. She was at the Royal Academy of Art for a semester. She created these types of interpretations of AI-generated images with these 3D renders. And more in that line, this is a work of Jan Roen Swaap, also a student of the Royal Academy of Art, who would, for instance, generate photographs or generate images of male bodies and then 3D print them. So also seeking for, again, this transition from the digital space to a more analog space, creating interesting visuals. This is more or less the process behind that kind of work. So both the tutors and the students enjoy it a lot. In case of different workshops, classes, there is, of course, a critical reflection on AI technology, often coming from sources like these, the famous Anatomy of AI by Kate Crawford, who also wrote this book, Atlas of AI. Our students would be exposed to the discourse of on AI in a broader sense, environmental perspective, the social perspective, the ethical concerns. So all the creative work that's being done, it's never done just in a vacuum of full just artistic expression. There are critical notes made on the technique used. And I think, again, as I stated at my introduction, if we if we do it in this kind of way that we mention the resources, mention the if we are transparent about the processes in art education, then I think there is no need for a more explicit or detailed policy for the implementation of AI in the future. But just this bottom line needs to this essential argument needs to be met. Thank you.
Thank you, Pawel. And that looked really interesting, and I suspect a lot more where that came from. There's lots of questions already in the Q&A, so thank you all for that. Our second speaker today is Grit Wolany, who works at Zurich University of the Arts, or ZHDK, which is the German abbreviation of the school that you hear a lot. Grit actually asked me not to introduce her in detail because that is a story she would like to tell you herself. Over to you, Grit.
Thank you, Maria, for the short intro and also for the invitation to speak here. Hello, everyone. This is the Toni Areal in Zurich. Once it was a yogurt factory, but now it's the campus of the biggest art university in Switzerland, the Zurich University of the Arts, ZHDK. We have over 2,000 students from all art disciplines, and we also have a really nice rooftop garden. So if you ever want to come visit us, so let's check this out. So, and this is me, seen by AI. My name is Grit Wolany, and I'm the AI scout of the ZHDK. So you may ask, okay, what does an AI scout do? And this is kind of a very good simple image of the scouting process. It's my job is basically a lot about observing and collecting and connecting, and I will tell you in a minute a bit more about the whole process. How did I become an AI scout? I'm not a programmer, and I'm also not a creative technologist, but I was always interested in technology. I studied communication design and art direction, and then worked in the field for over 15 years. And in 2020, a little bit before the pandemic, I did a digital ethics module, and this sparked my interest in AI and also in future thinking. And so I decided to take a time out of my professional job as a designer and went back to school and started a master in design, trends, and identity here at the ZHDK. So I have the student perspective first. I looked into the topic of AI in the creative economies and also into the future of learning and upskilling of creatives. And then last summer I graduated and I started working at the ZHDK Digital Skills and Spaces team. So we support members of the university in all terms of digitalization and skill building around new technologies and also around new forms of work. AI is nothing new at the ZHDK. We already had research projects as well as events and modules around the topic of AI. But I think what is new is the accessibility and the wide use of these new generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Midjourney and Stable Diffusion. And it's also new that really parts of the creative process can now be done by machines. And as a result, there was a need to develop a cross-universal approach to the whole thing, and the ZHDK Digital Council coordinates this. The Digital Council is a university internal group of experts in the field of digitalization, and they have the task of advising the university's management and implementing cross-university transformation projects. And so part of this new attitude towards AI was to create this new position of an AI scout that supports the Digital Council. And the job is really brand new. I started position, which is a part-time role in May. So I'm pretty fresh into the whole thing. So what do I do? My job has three main parts. The first one is horizon scanning. As you all know, the field of AI is highly dynamic. Every day there's new papers, there's new programs and apps and works and people. And so it's all about staying up to date and finding interesting approaches and inputs and information about what is going on, especially what is going on with AI, especially in context of the arts and as well as education. So for this, we share these findings on a Flipboard. It's public. You can visit it. The most articles in English and German, but it's I think it's interesting if you want to dig into a topic and find new stuff. And another form of kind of analog horizon scanning I do here at the ZHDK. I try to stay up to date about what is going on in the university and who is into the topic of AI and what projects are around and what knowledge is around, because we have a lot of departments that are a lot of smart people who are already like interested in the whole field. And so it's a bit like keeping track what is going on here in Zurich. But it's also about connecting to the people and listen to them. And it's about what is going on in their minds and what are their thoughts and what are their fears and their hopes and what support do they need, because it's always, every day it's a challenge. If you want to try something out and you need access to it, and who pays this, and is it safe, and can you use it? And so it's really, in my role also, it's about understanding the different angles and perspectives, and it's also about feeling the temperature of this whole topic in the school. And then another main part, of course, is about building up AI literacy at the ZHDK. And we do this by educating students and teachers and researchers and staff about AI through different workshops and input lectures. And this is not only done by me, it's done really by a different providers here at the ZHDK. We have a great learning and teaching team, the Media Information Center, the Digital Skills and Spaces team, but also directly in the different departments, they organize input lectures. And there will be more to come this fall. We already plan new courses, and the interest is really big. And we try to help the people get to know better the whole technology. So the elephant in the room, maybe if you look closer, you will find him. Does the ZHDK have an AI policy? Well, not yet, but we know we need some form of guidelines or position paper which helps our university members to handle and navigate the change. The strict guidelines are always a challenge because you want to remain open and curious, but also you need to define some rules and restrictions. And so right now we're in the process of researching around this whole topic, and we collect lots of relevant materials and start also clustering different context perspectives, because there's always more than one perspective to the whole topic. So we can have like a constructive discussion with diverse point of views, and then hopefully, And we are also very interested how other art universities handle this whole topic. So please get back to me if you. So our approach is basically a form of critical curiosity. That means we want to combine our human curiosity with the professional expertise, but also with the systematic investigation of the whole topic. And then hopefully we can face the challenges that AI provides to us with which is basically high complexity, fundamental impact for the creative professions, and also the crazy high speed of development, which is sometimes hard to follow. That was it from me, 7 minutes and 30 seconds. If you want to connect, you can write me an email or reach out on LinkedIn, and thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Grit. I think that was really, really fascinating to hear how you're building policies, and I think that is the place where most of us are, universities and otherwise, at this moment. Now, for our next speaker is Professor Michaël Lobet from the University of Namur. In the French-speaking world, I think there were two let's say, poles of approaches. There was Sciences Po in France that went out very quickly and said, this is not a good thing, we'll try to ban it. But we also had examples, and one of those was the University of Namur in Belgium that says, please go out, experiment with this, let's see how it works. And Michaël Lobet was one of the professors. Michaël Lobet is professor at Namur and at Harvard University in the US as well, who took that challenge and began to experiment with it. So Michaël, please let us hear what your experiments were.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thank you for having me here today. Yeah, I'm gonna try to speak about the two questions that you asked me about what's the impact of generative AI.
Michaël,
Yes,
can I just interrupt you? We see your notes on the screen.
perfect. Then let me switch it. Should be better like that.
That is perfect. Many thanks.
Thank you very much, Thomas. So yeah, what's the impact of generative AI on our institution? And as you mentioned, can we discuss a little bit about generative AI and the experience we had with that? And okay, the challenge is to make it in 5 to 7 minutes. So yes, I do see impact on our missions, right? Our 3 missions: research, education, and services. And I think, as we mentioned a little bit with Grit and Pawel before, there is a subtle balance between evolution and revolution. But now I would like to focus only on education, even if we can discuss about the other 2 topics another day. But I think that it could be a really good tool for the teacher when they want to prepare a lecture or design a course, for example. And also, it's great for students supervised by teachers. So for creating activities, in-class activity, I'm going to focus on that. But I have some backup slide later, and you will find the presentation on the website, or you can refer to another presentation I made recently if you want to have a bigger picture. So yeah, when you are designing or a class activity, I think there is one question that should guide us when design the activity, is asking ourselves, what can our student do that ChatGPT or generative AI can't? So, because definitely we must change our learning goals. It's over the time where we could ask something like, write a text about this writer's life. Now I think really we must admit that AI is part of the game, and we should better ask something like, ask ChatGPT to write a text about this writer's life, but double check the veracity of the generated text. So I'm going to provide some examples of teaching activities, because, it has been a great revolution around creativity. And I found the inspiration on Twitter. There are a lot of tweets which are pretty useful for that. You know that ChatGPT can create lyrics, poems. And here was an example that I really liked. They asked to have an explanation of Hegel's philosophy of the dialectic, but using an episode of The Simpsons. So you can see Marge, Homer, Lisa discussing the dialectic. Another tweet was from Joe Spacer, and he asked to write wedding vows, but using the style of Snoop Dogg. And okay, I think that we can use in the classroom is to generate such a text and compare the different styles and the different forms, and have a similar theme, but with different style. Another example, I like to call that ChatGPT as a student's buddy or a study partner, because, for example, you can ask the software to learn some material that you will provide him. So it could be either a part of your textbook or website. And then here is an example about a lecture on psychology. And then you can ask to provide question based on your own material. And actually, that's what I did in my classroom. I generated personalized exercise. And to be honest, that's also how I generated some question of my multiple choice exam. Another way that you can use it, if you are you are developing codes with your students, it can provide codes. I'm not saying it's 100% accurate, but it can provide a code like tic-tac-toe in Python. It can also debug an existing code for you, and you can ask ChatGPT to explain what the code is doing. So that could be transformed in a class activity. Or another one is to ask to code with mistakes, and then you ask your students to spot those mistakes, and so they will either use ChatGPT or not, but they will learn by finding those mistakes. Another way to use it is to use it as a writing assistant. You know that you have a text that you want to proofread, and then it can suggest revisions for grammar, stylistic, etc. But I think also by comparing, your students can improve their writing style. So did I do that in my class? Yes, I did. I tried some stuff this semester, and there were some success and some failure. And I'm going to talk about what was not successful, because I think that it's better to learn about the pitfalls and trying not to reproduce them. So it was a classroom of a bit more than 300 students from biology and veterinary science, all first bachelor. And what I suggested them is to say, okay, we have 5 chapters, and we will ask ChatGPT to make a small exercise at the end of each chapter. It could be summarizing this chapter, giving some examples, suggest experiments, defining some concepts, or solving an exercise of physics in my case. And actually, what I had in mind, I didn't tell them, but I had the Bloom's taxonomy in mind with different levels there. So, okay, first lecture, 300 students, 120 students said they were motivated. So we had a first meeting, but only 25 students showed up. And then only 6 students registered and performed the activity. So in that sense, it's kind of a failure, even though with the 6, I can have qualitative data. But I had to understand why it was somehow a fail. And I think there was multiple reasons for failure. First of all, it's some students from first bachelor, so it's a whole new life for them being at university. And I was not giving any points for the exam or any bonus. So basically, I asked them to do extra work, and they did not have the time. But actually, what was interesting also is that I had a hidden assumption. I thought my student knew AI, but actually they don't know AI. And there was a study led by Michaël Lobet, Valérie Wathelet, and Antoine Honnet here at our university. And they surveyed a bit more than 1,000 students from first bachelor, from all the different faculties, science, medicine, all the faculties. And importantly, the survey was anonymous. It was done in February and March. And actually, we found out that only 13% of our students use ChatGPT for help in their lecture. And actually, that number was confirmed by another survey in the US, saying that 15% of the adults were using it to learn something or for doing work. So that's my final message here, is that we have to remember that roughly 1 out of 6 students knows AI. 5 out of 6 does not know about ChatGPT yet. So we must teach them how to use the tool properly. I give you some reference if you want to go further with the study, and I would like to thank my colleagues, of course, and of course, thank you for your attention, and we can discuss this a bit further.
So many thanks, Michaël. I think it is interesting that there's the assumption that students are digital natives, and of course they know. But what you say, if I hear you right, is that we actually have to teach how to use AI. It doesn't come naturally to anybody, and I think that is a really good point. So many thanks again, and let's go to our last speaker, Rettberg from University of Bergen in Norway, who comes in with a humanities take, I would suppose, on this, but also telling about the way that the University of Bergen has dealt with AI in general. So please, Jill, go ahead.
Thank you. You see my slides? Hello, do you see my slides?
Yes, we do,
Okay.
Jill.
Excellent, fabulous. Okay, I'm in the humanities. I'm a professor of digital culture, and I'm co-director of a brand new Center of Research Excellence, the Center for Digital Narrative, which is starting this summer. And AI-generated narratives are one of the things we are researching. So obviously, I'm very fascinated by AI. I've been asked to give a kind of an institutional perspective this time, because at our university we have we're in a beautiful place. We're spread out over the city, as you can see here, and we're like a classical breadth university with faculties from medicine and law and humanities and natural sciences. So we have discovered we have AI researched and taught across all faculties, and I think that's really key for us to understand. I loved how the art schools began here, talking about how important AI, or how you can use AI very creatively in art. I think you can use it in absolutely every discipline. So this is just where our Center for Digital Narrative is going to be, right in the middle. Very exciting. So at University of Bergen, we've established a cross-faculty network called UIB-AI, which is supposed to facilitate this interdisciplinary collaboration. And I thought what Grit said earlier about being an AI scout, I think actually this is a different approach to sort of the same problem, though. How do you actually figure out what's out there, coordinate things, combine things? And what we've chosen to do is to have we've started with having seminars and conferences, and we found that people really want to know about AI. So we've focused on the cross-disciplinary thing, both letting different groups talk. I mean, we have, for instance, we've got learning analytics, we've got the people working in biomedicine and in medical imaging, we've got people working with media on how journalists and stuff use AI to generate stories and so forth. And in digital culture, where I am, we're using AI and understanding how it's used in art, in narratives, and just culturally in general. So these seminars have been really popular. We've had a lot of people coming, especially after ChatGPT, when everyone starts being aware of this, how AI is really impacting us across society. AI is just one more of, a long list of technologies. This is the Jacquard loom. Obviously, you get a new computer. This is basically a computer. There's this punch card actually is the program that allows this very complex pattern to be woven. And these are the machines that Luddites destroyed in the 1800s because they felt that the machines were taking their jobs. And today, obviously, a loom like this isn't seen as, well, I suppose they did replace some workers, but they also enabled completely new kinds of craft that were not possible previously. This is the difference engine Babbage designed in the 30s. Ada Lovelace, the first programmer, she argued that this difference engine, even back then, people were thinking, oh, it's these machines, they might be able to do things on their own. Remember Mary Shelley had just written Frankenstein. People were worried about this. Ada Lovelace said, no, it can only do what you program it to do. Of course, now we're kind of worried about this. This is Vertov in the 1920s, talking about cinema as this new way of seeing the world. And I think that's part of what's happening now with ChatGPT and these new language models. They are doing new things that we don't quite understand. And so we're afraid that they are actually, almost alive, sentient, that they'll take our jobs. That's sort of my main research area, is how algorithms, how AI are affecting us. So you should definitely read my book, which is there on the right. It's coming out in September. James Bridle's book is already out, and it's also very good if you're interested in these ways of how AI is changing the way we see things. But back to UIB, we wanted to integrate AI across our curriculums as well. And we do have, the dedicated study programs that focus on AI in several different faculties. But we also recently established these tiny courses, just 2.5 ECTS courses that are designed so all students can take them. And they're so small. Some of them are online only, some of them are taught on campus. But they're small, so they're very sort of accessible for any student who wants to learn just a little bit about these different things. And they've been immensely popular. We have hundreds of students taking each of these courses that have now become available to staff and outsiders as well. Just in general, I think there's a huge sort of hunger for knowledge about ChatGPT. And I think as universities, it's really our responsibility to give that to people. As Michael mentioned, a lot of students don't know, either they're not using it, or if they do use it, they don't understand how it works. And they don't understand that it's not an authoritative source. It makes things up. It's just statistically predicting what might be a possible text. And so it's incredibly important that we as a university make sure that our students and also staff actually have the basic knowledge to be able to use this in a responsible and constructive way. So at University of Bergen, we haven't had like a general policy for the whole university because we feel that there are such differences between the different disciplines. The social science faculty has established clear guidelines, and I thought they really go through, what is it good for? And this is particularly in terms of exams and student writing, for instance. So they've clearly said you can't submit a text that is partly written by ChatGPT, but you can use ChatGPT to help structuring an essay or even for restructuring a text that you've written, for improving the language, maybe for summarizing something that you didn't understand and getting help to understand texts and so forth, and for getting ideas. They point out that it's very difficult to sort of to tell these apart sometimes, right? So you got an idea from ChatGPT. If you just paste that into your text, that's not great. But if you take that idea and then you go and research it and develop it, that could be fabulous. But these are fine lines. And many of the other faculties have not established such clear guidelines. And I know that's very frustrating for many colleagues who find that, that a student clearly used ChatGPT, like maybe an assignment just has made up sources in it. So it's clear that it's ChatGPT. And there aren't very clear guidelines on what to do about that. On the other hand, we've had examples of people using it very productively, like the big intro to programming course that all students in the natural sciences have to take. They were encouraged to use ChatGPT to help them. And that seemed to work very well, except perhaps the students who chose not to use it perhaps they were put at more of a disadvantage than they should have been. Students who want to learn everything themselves end up taking a lot more time. I taught in digital culture, and of course we've had students writing papers about how to use it, how to use it as my time's up. Huh. I wasn't planning that to be so loud. But I'm at my final slide pretty much. My take-home message is that people really want to understand AI, and we should really support that by small, accessible courses, up-to-date seminars and events. And it's important to think both cross-disciplinarity, really use the breadth of your university, but also to think about the discipline specificity, because each subject actually needs to discuss what their students need. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. This has been also really interesting, and I'm so fascinated by how all these stories connect and come together. And I think the wanting to understand it, I think and the hunger that you described, I think that's something that all of our members at ELIA and at EUA are really recognizing, also in their students, but also in the teaching staff. So I think that's a really interesting point to go more deeply into. So thank you, and thanks to our 4 speakers. And we now have a few minutes for questions, and I'm just going to kick it off. We have Q&A, and thank goodness there is a voting system, so there's so many questions, but it's great. I fear we've lost Pawel at the moment, but so I will ask my first question, which is back to Grit, who is the AI scout. there was a question about providing access to AI, to generative AI tools for students. And there was also a question about extravist sources of software, and the idea, or a question about, do you know more about open source, and do you have, do you go down that road as well? So I guess it's a twofold question.
Yeah, it's a question we get a lot because the creatives love the Midjourney quality, but Midjourney is kind of not open source. So, and it's always a bit like, who's paying for that? The students, or is it the departments? And can we share the accounts? And so it's always a bit, difficult. And I think Midjourney also wanted to do more with the educational institute. So maybe there will be something in the next month. But then there's open source with the Stable Diffusion. And I think this is a goal for us at the university. So the students can already use this by their own. But I think it would be very helpful to have something that is accessible for the ZHDK people, easy accessible, because it always depends, are you on Mac, are you on PC? So I think it would be great to have some kind of, provide some platform where the people can use it if they're interested in. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Pawel, can you hear us?
I think so.
Yes. Well, okay, we can hear you. There was a question in the chat, quite highly ranked, about authorship and IP. And you had talked about discussing generative AI quite a bit with the students, and about this sort of healthy criticality that they're exhibiting. Do you discuss authorship and intellectual property with your students? And if anybody else wants to weigh in, please do.
Yes, we do discuss it, but we don't necessarily discuss it in a different way than we do it with with a notion of copyrights or referencing works of others. In the discourse on generative AI, in this sense, doesn't change that type of discussion that is out there, as I said in my presentation, also out there for years, also concerning other technologies, other ways of relating your work to different makers or authors. So in this case, if the author is AI or co-author, I guess again, if there is if we feature that fact in the communication around the project, if the process is transparent on that, and I think most of our students are not are exactly even willing to reveal their sources and to discuss their sources. So that's also what makes their work currently relevant, to be in that discourse, to ask the audience as well how they perceive it, how the professors think about it, and so forth. So in that sense, yes, we do engage in that discussion. It's ongoing.
Thank you. Thomas, over to you.
I think Michaël was wanted to say something about IP there. Michaël.
Yeah, I can maybe mention something. I've read a really interesting paper also about how the best practice to use when we write a manuscript using AI. It's a paper published in ACS Nano, and I will provide the link in the chat. But what I really like in that paper is that the authors provided guidelines and recommendation. And they said something like, you have to say that you are using ChatGPT or AI tool, acknowledge it in your manuscript quite clearly, and you have also to remember that you have to check again everything that they are saying. They were also mentioning that we should not use any text verbatim, because otherwise you could have plagiarism, but and it's your own responsibility to check that and to verify all the source and so on. So I think that actually, to be honest, I just finished writing a master thesis on my own in pedagogy that I defended yesterday, and I used that strategy, and the jury really liked it, being honest and showing how you are doing and how you are dealing with AI I think that's probably the best, and we should have such kind of discussion with our students.
Okay, thank you very much, and congratulations. Yeah,
thank you.
with the defense. Yeah, there's a question here from a master student, and it goes a bit in a direction, and maybe Jill wants to start with it. It goes in a direction that's different from one we heard about this learning challenge and these constructive ways, but also the fact that universities begin to check and use AI to check for AI, and you get a lot of false positives out of that, and that is of course scary if you're a student. So Jill, since you've been dealing with faculty guidelines on this, do you have a comment on that?
Yes, this is a really difficult question, because there are certainly cases where, like for instance, we had a student, the students were supposed to do peer review of each other's works, and one of the students used ChatGPT for the peer review, which was obvious because they'd made up a quotation, right? So they were actually recommending that another student use this made up quotation. And that's obviously a problem, right? That kind of thing you can prove, because it's pretty obvious that that citation is not on page 78 of that book. But there are so many cases where you won't. So it's a very difficult situation for professors. I think the ideal thing is to avoid the kind of situation where we'd even have to worry about it. To be honest, this semester, the course that I taught myself, the exam was oral presentations, and I was so happy because that kind of just direct dialogue, conversation, presentations, I mean, that's something we humans are good at, that we don't even need to try to use ChatGPT to fake, right? So I think it's a very difficult question, but I think we'll actually be needing to go back to a more dialogic form of assessment and learning.
That is an excellent point. Unless somebody wants to say more about these things, I just want to go back to one of the things that Maria also asked about. But the two questions I think that are connected. One that is, how should we provide access to generative AI tools for students? But I think it's connected to the question also about open source, saying, should we, as I understand the question, provide open source solution also so that we can control these tools that the students use, and we don't sort of throw them to big tech. I'm not sure you want to say something about that?
I would love to say something, because we've been discussing this a lot. We had the Norwegian conference on AI was last week, and we were discussing the need for just European models, both because of open source and those issues and copyright and so forth, but also because the current models are trained mostly on English language, mostly American data, and there's a cultural bias there that I think we risk if we don't actually, as probably Europe as a whole just needs to really invest in training our own models, because otherwise I think we risk losing our cultural diversity, and the old fear of Americanization is just going to be embedded in all our software.
Although it does give different answers if you ask it in different languages. But I share your feel. Does anybody else want to come in on this? Throw the students to the lions. If not, then I'll just hand it over to Maria again.
Yes, thank you, Thomas, and thank you all. I think this has been a really interesting hour together. It feels really like we're just at the start, and you can also feel the excitement of all of you working in this area, as Jill called it, the huge hunger to be involved in this topic. And I really like the way, I mean, there are the healthy criticality that was talked about is important to instill in or bring into the conversations with the students at all times. There are some really serious ethical issues, of course. There was also quite a question around biases and the influencing the democratic process, which is really highly concerning. And when the EU crafted the Artificial Intelligence Act and ranked risks into high risk, unacceptable risks, and so on, I think that's the kind of conversation about models that also Jill is talking about. And I think that we need to be part of for the institutions that all of you lead. The why not, yes, but no, thank you approach, I think works really, really well because it starts a conversation. And I think that's something, a good takeaway to take into any institution at this point. With that, I thank the EUA for inviting ELIA to be part of this, and I hand back to Thomas.
And thanks also to you. I think this has been really a good example of the multidisciplinary aspects of generative AI, and we shouldn't be all focused on ChatGPT that can make words, but really also on how this is more broadly used. I want to thank all the speakers for really different and very, very interesting presentations. I want to thank the audience for their good questions. We didn't have time to go through all of them, but there were many that were really, really good, and you can see that people are thinking about the consequences of using these new technologies, which is that critical dialogue, that critical thinking that came up again and again in the presentations. So this is definitely not the last word on AI. We're going to talk more about it. EUA is, of course, watching the space. We're looking at what happened. Maria mentioned EU legislation, which is, of course, important and which we're looking at, but also particularly, how is this used on the ground? What are the experiences from the members? And we're really looking forward to seeing all the creative ways. I think that is a big takeaway. This is not just a threat. This is also a new constructive and creative way of using technology. So with those words, thanks to everybody, and join us again for another EUA webinar. I should say also that we will leave, I suppose, the presentations, but also all the links that people have sent to different policies, to different resources. We'll leave those on the platform. You can come back and see them as well. You'll also get a nice post-event email very soon. So many thanks, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.